In the sweltering heat of a Mississippi summer, the aroma of grilled meat and the sound of laughter filled the air in the backyard of the Williams family's new home. Michael Williams, a tall, distinguished man in his early 40s, with kind eyes and a warm smile, stood proudly at the grill, expertly flipping burgers and turning hot dogs. His wife, Olivia, a beautiful woman with a quick wit and infectious laugh, bustled about, making sure their guests had everything they needed. Their children, 14-year-old Zoe and 10-year-old Ethan, played happily with their new friends from the neighborhood. The Williams family had only recently moved to the quiet suburban neighborhood of Magnolia Heights in Jackson, Mississippi. It was a fresh start for the family, and they were eager to make a good impression on their new neighbors. This backyard barbecue was their way of introducing themselves to the community, a gesture of goodwill and friendship. As the afternoon wore on, the party was in full swing. The air was filled with the sounds of children playing, adults chatting, and music playing softly in the background. It was everything the Williams had hoped for, a perfect way to begin their new life in this community. However, unbeknownst to the Williams and their guests, not everyone was pleased with the gathering. Across the street, behind tightly drawn curtains, stood Margaret Sutton, a woman in her late 60s with steel gray hair and a perpetual frown etched on her face. Her eyes narrowed as she watched the scene unfolding in the Williams' backyard. Margaret had lived in Magnolia Heights for over 4 decades, and she prided herself on maintaining what she considered to be the character of the neighborhood. To her, the arrival of the Williams, the first black family to move onto the street, was an unwelcome change. The sight of their backyard filled with a diverse group of people, laughing and enjoying themselves, filled her with a mixture of anger and fear. With trembling hands, Margaret reached for her phone. Her fingers hovered over the keypad for a moment as doubt crept into her mind. But then, she heard a particularly loud burst of laughter from across the street, and her resolve hardened. She dialed 911. The 911 dispatcher, a seasoned professional named Sarah Thompson, answered the call with her usual calm demeanor. Margaret's voice quivered as she spoke, infusing her words with a sense of urgency and fear that she didn't truly feel. She reported a disturbance in her neighborhood, claiming that there was a loud party with suspicious individuals who might be engaged in illegal activities. She carefully avoided mentioning race, but her coded language left little doubt about the true nature of her complaint. As Margaret hung up the phone, a mix of emotions washed over her. There was a sense of satisfaction at having taken action, but also a gnawing feeling of guilt that she quickly pushed aside. She told herself that she was simply looking out for the safety and peace of her neighborhood. Sarah, the dispatcher, frowned as she logged the call. Something about it didn't sit right with her. But protocol demanded that she dispatch officers to investigate. She reached for her radio, her fingers hesitating for just a moment before she made the call. 2 patrol officers, Jake Martinez and Chris Thompson, responded to the call. As they drove towards Magnolia Heights, they discussed the situation. Jake, a veteran officer with 15 years on the force, had a feeling that this might be a case of a neighbor overreacting. Chris, younger and less experienced, was more inclined to take the call at face value. As they turned onto Magnolia Drive, the officers immediately spotted the gathering at the Williams home. From their vantage point, it was clear that this was nothing more than a family barbecue. Children played in the front yard, and the sound of music and laughter drifted through the air. Jake and Chris exchanged a glance. This was not the scene of suspicious activity or a disturbance that they had been led to expect. Nevertheless, they had to follow up on the call. They parked their patrol car and approached the Williams home. The arrival of the police car did not go unnoticed. A hush fell over the gathering as Michael Williams stepped away from the grill, wiping his hands on his apron. He approached the officers with a mix of confusion and concern on his face. What happened next would send shockwaves through the community and force a reckoning with deeply ingrained prejudices and assumptions. As Michael introduced himself to the officers, a flicker of recognition passed over Jake's face. He had seen Michael before, but not in the context he was expecting. The realization hit him like a thunderbolt. Michael Williams was not just any new resident of Magnolia Heights. He was the newly appointed chief of police for the Jackson Police Department, set to take office in just a few days. The situation quickly transformed from a routine call into a potentially explosive incident. Jake's mind raced as he tried to figure out how to handle this delicate situation. He knew that their presence here, responding to what was clearly a false alarm, could have serious repercussions. Meanwhile, the party guests had noticed the police presence. A tense silence fell over the gathering, replaced by hushed whispers and concerned glances. Olivia Williams stepped forward to stand beside her husband, her face a mask of calm dignity that barely concealed her anger and hurt. Michael, ever the professional, kept his composure as he spoke with the officers. He understood the position they were in, having been in similar situations himself countless times over his career. But that understanding did little to quell the anger and disappointment he felt at having his family's celebration interrupted in this way. As the conversation between Michael and the officers continued, neighbors began to gather on the sidewalk, drawn by the unexpected police presence. Among them was Margaret Sutton, who watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of horror. She had never imagined that her call would lead to this, a confrontation that was quickly becoming the talk of the neighborhood. The news spread rapidly through the gathered crowd. Whispers of, "That's the new police chief," and "Someone called the cops on the police chief's family barbecue," rippled through the onlookers. The atmosphere was charged with tension, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and indignation. For the Williams family, what should have been a joyful day of celebration and community building had turned into a stark reminder of the challenges they faced as a black family in America. Even Michael's position as the incoming police chief couldn't shield them from the realities of racial profiling and discrimination. As the situation unfolded, it became clear that this incident would have far-reaching consequences. It wasn't just about one neighbor's misguided call or two officers responding to a false alarm. This was a moment that would force the entire community of Magnolia Heights, and indeed the city of Jackson, to confront uncomfortable truths about race, privilege, and the presumption of criminality. The story of the barbecue that was interrupted by a police call would soon make headlines, not just in Jackson, but across the state and even nationally. It would spark discussions about racial bias, the responsibility of citizens when calling the police, and the challenges faced by black professionals in positions of authority. For Michael Williams, this incident would shape his approach to his new role as chief of police. He had always known that he would face unique challenges as a black man in this position, but he never expected to encounter them in such a personal way before he even officially took office. As the officers prepared to leave, having confirmed that there was no disturbance or illegal activity, the weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. The Williams barbecue would continue, but it would never be the carefree celebration they had planned. Instead, it had become a pivotal moment in their lives and in the life of their new community. In the days and weeks that followed, the incident at the Williams home would become a catalyst for change in Magnolia Heights and beyond. It would force uncomfortable conversations, challenge long-held beliefs, and ultimately pave the way for a deeper understanding between neighbors of different races and backgrounds. But on that hot summer afternoon, as the police car pulled away and the guests slowly returned to their celebrations, the future remained uncertain. The Williams stood together, a family united in the face of adversity, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. They knew that their journey in Magnolia Heights had only just begun, and that the true test of their community would be in how it responded to this moment of crisis. As news of the incident spread, reactions varied widely throughout the community. Some residents of Magnolia Heights were horrified and embarrassed by what had happened, quick to distance themselves from Margaret Sutton's actions. Others, however, were more hesitant to condemn her, arguing that she had simply been looking out for the neighborhood's safety. The local media quickly picked up the story, with reporters descending on Magnolia Heights in droves. The Williams family found themselves at the center of a media storm they had never anticipated or wanted. Cameras and microphones were thrust in their faces whenever they left their home, each reporter hungry for a soundbite or an emotional reaction. Michael Williams, drawing on years of experience in handling high-pressure situations, took control of the narrative. He issued a statement to the press, his words carefully chosen to address the incident without inflaming tensions further. "What happened to my family yesterday is unfortunately not unique," Michael said, his voice steady and his gaze direct. "It's a reflection of the biases and prejudices that still exist in our society. But I believe that this can be a moment of education and growth for our community. As I prepare to take on the role of Chief of Police, I am more committed than ever to fostering understanding and equity in our city." Olivia Williams, standing by her husband's side, added her own thoughts. Her words were filled with emotion, giving voice to the hurt and frustration that many Black families feel when confronted with racial profiling. "We moved to Magnolia Heights, hoping to find a welcoming community for our children," Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly. "Instead, we were reminded that no matter our achievements or our contributions to society, some people will always see us as a threat simply because of the color of our skin. It's a painful reality, but one we're committed to changing, not just for our family, but for all families who face this kind of discrimination." The Williams' dignified response to the incident earned them widespread sympathy and support. Many in the community rallied around them, organizing demonstrations of solidarity and initiating community discussions about race and privilege. Meanwhile, Margaret Sutton found herself at the center of a growing controversy. As word spread that she had been the one to call the police, she became the target of intense criticism and anger. Some neighbors shunned her, while others called for her to apologize publicly to the Williams family. Margaret, for her part, initially tried to defend her actions. She insisted that she had genuinely believed there was cause for concern and that race had played no part in her decision to call the police. But as the backlash grew and she saw the pain her actions had caused, the certainty of her convictions began to waver. In the days following the incident, Margaret rarely left her home. Drawing her curtains tight against the accusing stares of her neighbors and the lenses of news cameras, she found herself grappling with emotions she had never expected: shame, regret, and a growing realization of the harm her assumptions had caused. At the Jackson Police Department, the incident sparked intense discussions and soul-searching. Many officers were horrified that one of their own, their future chief, no less, had been subjected to such treatment. Others, however, were more defensive, arguing that they were simply doing their job by responding to a call. Officer Jake Martinez, who had been one of the responding officers, found himself particularly affected by the incident. He had always prided himself on being a fair and unbiased officer, but the events at the Williams home forced him to confront his own unconscious biases. In a private meeting with Michael Williams, Jake apologized for his role in the incident. "I should have questioned the call more thoroughly," he admitted, his voice heavy with regret. "I let assumptions guide my actions, and for that, I'm truly sorry." Michael, recognizing the sincerity in Jake's words, saw an opportunity for growth and learning. He began to formulate plans for enhanced training programs within the department, focusing on unconscious bias and community relations. As the days passed, the incident continued to reverberate through the community. Local civil rights organizations called for an investigation into the police department's policies and practices. Community leaders organized town hall meetings to discuss issues of race and policing. The Magnolia Heights Neighborhood Association, previously more concerned with property values and lawn maintenance, found itself grappling with weightier issues of inclusion and diversity. For Zoe and Ethan Williams, the incident was a harsh introduction to the realities of growing up Black in America. Zoe, at 14, was old enough to understand the implications of what had happened. She found herself struggling with feelings of anger and confusion, questioning why someone would see their family gathering as a threat. Ethan, at 10, was less able to grasp the complexities of the situation, but he sensed the tension and worry that had entered his family's life. His carefree excitement about their new home had been replaced by a wary cautiousness that no child should have to feel. Olivia and Michael did their best to guide their children through this difficult time, using it as an opportunity to have honest conversations about race and society. They emphasized the importance of pride in their identity and the strength that comes from facing adversity with dignity and determination. As the media attention began to die down, the real work of healing and change began in Magnolia Heights. Some residents, galvanized by the incident, formed a community action group dedicated to promoting diversity and inclusion in the neighborhood. They organized workshops, book clubs, and community events aimed at fostering understanding between neighbors of different backgrounds. Others in the community, however, were less eager to engage with these issues. Some longtime residents grumbled about the changes coming to their neighborhood, longing for what they saw as simpler times. These tensions simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over at any moment. Michael Williams, now officially installed as chief of police, found himself in the unique position of having to bridge these divides, both as a resident of Magnolia Heights and as the leader of the city's law enforcement. He approached this challenge with the same determination and integrity that had defined his career. One of Michael's first actions as chief was to implement a comprehensive review of the department's training programs and policies. He brought in experts on racial bias and community policing, determined to create a police force that truly served and protected all members of the community. The changes Michael implemented were not always popular. Some officers resisted, seeing the new training programs as an implication that they were racist. Others, however, embraced the opportunity to improve their skills and build better relationships with the communities they served. As weeks turned into months, the Williams family slowly began to settle into life in Magnolia Heights. They remained committed to being active and visible members of the community, refusing to let one negative incident define their experience. Olivia threw herself into community work, joining the PTA at her children's schools and volunteering at local organizations. She was determined to be a positive force for change, using her experiences to educate others and promote understanding. Zoe and Ethan, with the resilience of youth, began to thrive in their new environment. Zoe joined the school debate team, channeling her newfound awareness of social issues into passionate arguments for equality and justice. Ethan, with his outgoing personality, made friends easily, bringing a diverse group of children together through his love of sports and video games. Margaret Sutton, after weeks of isolation and reflection, finally found the courage to face the Williams family. One evening, she knocked on their door, her hands shaking as she waited for someone to answer. When Michael opened the door, Margaret was struck by the kindness in his eyes. Despite everything that had happened, she stumbled through an apology, tears streaming down her face as she confronted the harm her actions had caused. The Williams listened to Margaret's apology with grace and empathy. While they couldn't forget the pain her actions had caused, they recognized the courage it took for her to acknowledge her mistake and seek forgiveness. This moment of reconciliation, while personal, became symbolic of the larger changes happening in Magnolia Heights. It showed that growth and understanding were possible, even in the face of deeply ingrained biases and misconceptions. As the one-year anniversary of their move to Magnolia Heights approached, the Williams decided to host another backyard barbecue. This time, the entire neighborhood was invited, including Margaret Sutton. The day of the barbecue dawned bright and clear. The Williams' backyard was once again filled with the sounds of laughter and the smell of grilling food. But this time, the gathering was different. The guests represented a true cross-section of the community. Families of various races and backgrounds, police officers and community activists, longtime residents and newcomers. As Michael stood at the grill, he looked out over the diverse group of people in his backyard. He saw Officer Jake Martinez chatting amicably with a local civil rights leader. He watched as Zoe and her friends from the debate team engaged in a spirited discussion about local politics with some of the older residents. Ethan was teaching a group of kids, including Margaret Sutton's grandson, how to play his favorite video game. And there, helping Olivia set out dishes on the buffet table, was Margaret Sutton herself. The two women worked side by side, their conversation flowing easily as they discussed plans for the upcoming neighborhood food drive. As Michael stood on the back porch, his figure silhouetted against the setting sun, he took a moment to survey the diverse group gathered before him. The sight filled him with a sense of pride and hope for the future. He cleared his throat and began to speak, his deep voice carrying across the yard. Friends, neighbors, thank you all for being here today. A year ago, when we first moved to Magnolia Heights, we couldn't have imagined the journey that lay ahead of us. We've faced challenges, we've had difficult conversations, and we've grown together as a community. Michael paused, his eyes scanning the crowd. He could see nods of agreement and a few teary eyes among the listeners. What happened that day at our first barbecue was painful, he continued, his voice softer now. But it was also a wake-up call. It forced us all to confront the biases and prejudices that exist in our society, even when we don't want to acknowledge them. And more importantly, it gave us the opportunity to do something about it. He gestured to the diverse group before him. Look around you. A year ago, this gathering wouldn't have been possible. But today, we stand here together, not as strangers or adversaries, but as friends and neighbors. We've shown that change is possible when we open our hearts and minds to one another. As Michael spoke, Olivia watched from the side, her eyes brimming with pride and love for her husband. She could see the impact his words were having on their guests. Even those who had initially been skeptical of the changes in Magnolia Heights were nodding along, moved by Michael's sincerity and the visible proof of progress around them. But our work isn't done, Michael continued, his tone becoming more serious. What we've achieved here in Magnolia Heights is just the beginning. We need to carry this spirit of understanding and inclusion beyond our neighborhood. As your police chief, I promise to continue working towards a police force that truly serves and protects all members of our community, regardless of race or background. He paused again, his gaze sweeping across the gathering. And I ask each of you to join me in this effort. Whether it's in your workplace, your school, or your social circles, carry the lessons we've learned here with you. Be the change we want to see in the world. As Michael finished speaking, a spontaneous applause broke out. It wasn't just polite clapping. It was an enthusiastic, heartfelt ovation that spoke volumes about the impact his words and his leadership had had on the community. Olivia stepped forward to join her husband, and together they announced the launch of the Magnolia Heights Community Bridge Program. This initiative would focus on fostering understanding and cooperation between law enforcement and the community, with a particular emphasis on youth engagement. The announcement was met with excitement and immediate offers of support. Officer Jake Martinez volunteered to be one of the program's first mentors, while Margaret Sutton offered to help with administrative tasks. The energy in the backyard was palpable as people began to discuss how they could contribute to the program. As the evening wore on, the gathering took on an almost festive atmosphere. The shared food, laughter, and conversation seemed to break down the last of the barriers that had once divided the neighborhood. People who had once viewed each other with suspicion or indifference were now chatting like old friends, sharing stories and making plans for future community events. Zoe Williams, watching the scene unfold from her perch on the porch swing, felt a sense of pride and hope well up inside her. The past year had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. She had watched her parents navigate difficult situations with grace and determination, setting an example that she was eager to follow. Ethan, tired but happy after a day of play, climbed into his father's lap as Michael sat down beside Zoe. The family sat together in comfortable silence, taking in the scene before them. "Dad," Zoe said after a while, her voice thoughtful, "do you think what we've done here could work in other places too?" Michael smiled at his daughter, impressed by her insight. "I believe it can, Zoe. It won't be easy, and it will take time. But what we've achieved here in Magnolia Heights proves that real change is possible. We just need to be willing to do the work." Olivia joined her family on the porch, wrapping an arm around Zoe's shoulders. "And remember," she added, "change starts with each one of us. The choices we make, the way we treat others, it all matters." As the last of the guests began to leave, each stopping to thank the Williams for their hospitality, Michael and Olivia exchanged a look of quiet triumph. They had faced adversity head-on and had not only survived, but thrived. More importantly, they had been catalysts for positive change in their community. The incident that had once threatened to divide Magnolia Heights had instead become a turning point, a moment that sparked difficult but necessary conversations and led to real, tangible changes. The neighborhood was not perfect. No community is. But it had made significant strides towards becoming a more inclusive, understanding place. In the weeks and months that followed, the effects of the Williams influence continued to ripple through Magnolia Heights and beyond. The Community Bridge program gained traction, with other neighborhoods in Jackson looking to implement similar initiatives. The Jackson Police Department, under Michael's leadership, became a model for community-oriented policing, with other cities sending representatives to learn from their approach. Olivia's work with the PTA and local organizations led to increased diversity in school curricula and community programs. She became a respected voice in local politics, advocating for policies that promoted equity and inclusion. Zoe's passion for social justice, nurtured by her experiences, led her to start a youth advocacy group at her school. The group quickly grew, tackling issues ranging from bullying to environmental concerns, always with an eye towards promoting understanding and respect among their peers. Ethan, in his own way, continued to bring people together through his love of sports and games. His Little League team became known for its diverse makeup and inclusive spirit, a reflection of the changes happening in the broader community. Margaret Sutton, once the catalyst for conflict, became one of the Williams' strongest allies. She used her long-standing connections in the neighborhood to help bridge the gap between old and new residents, often sharing her own story as a testament to the possibility of change and growth. Officer Jake Martinez, inspired by his experiences with the Williams and the Community Bridge program, became a vocal advocate for police reform within the department. He worked closely with Michael to implement new training programs and policies, helping to build trust between law enforcement and the community. As the story of Magnolia Heights' transformation spread, it began to attract attention from beyond Jackson. Journalists and researchers came to study the community's approach to addressing racial bias and promoting inclusion. While the attention was sometimes overwhelming, the residents of Magnolia Heights recognized the importance of sharing their experiences in the hope of inspiring similar changes elsewhere. One day, about 6 months after the anniversary barbecue, Michael received a call from the mayor's office. The mayor wanted to meet with him to discuss expanding the Community Bridge program citywide. As Michael hung up the phone, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation. This was an opportunity to effect change on a much larger scale, but he knew it would also bring new challenges and scrutiny. That evening, as the Williams family sat down to dinner, Michael shared the news. Olivia's eyes lit up with excitement, while Zoe and Ethan peppered their father with questions about what this would mean for their family and the community. "It means we have a chance to make a real difference," Michael explained, his voice filled with determination. "But it also means we'll need to work harder than ever. This isn't just about Magnolia Heights anymore. It's about changing the entire city of Jackson." As they discussed the possibilities and challenges ahead, the Williams family felt a renewed sense of purpose. They had already accomplished so much, but there was still work to be done, and they were ready to face it together, just as they had faced every other challenge that had come their way. The next day, as Michael prepared for his meeting with the mayor, he couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. From that tense afternoon when the police had been called to their barbecue, to now being on the verge of implementing a citywide program for community engagement and police reform, it was almost hard to believe. But as he looked out the window at the bustling streets of Jackson, Michael knew that their work was far from over. There were still hearts and minds to be changed, systems to be reformed, and bridges to be built. But he also knew that they had proven it was possible. One neighborhood at a time, one conversation at a time, they could create the change they wanted to see in the world. As Michael left for his meeting, Olivia gave him a kiss and a reassuring squeeze of his hand. "Go change the world, Chief Williams," she said with a smile. And with that, Michael stepped out into the bright Mississippi sunshine, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that he had the support of his family and his community behind him. The journey that had begun with a simple backyard barbecue was far from over, but the path forward was clear. Together, they would continue to build bridges, foster understanding, and work towards a more just and equitable future for all. As Michael drove to City Hall, his mind raced with ideas and possibilities. He thought about all the people who had played a part in Magnolia Heights' transformation, from Margaret Sutton, who had faced her own biases and grown from the experience, to Officer Jake Martinez, who had become a champion for change within the police force. He thought about his children, Zoe and Ethan, and how they had risen to the challenges they faced with resilience and determination. They were the future, and it was for them and all the children of Jackson that he was committed to making these changes. The meeting with the mayor went better than Michael could have hoped. The success of the Community Bridge program in Magnolia Heights had not gone unnoticed, and the mayor was eager to implement similar initiatives across Jackson. They spent hours discussing the details, the potential challenges, and the resources that would be needed. As Michael left City Hall, he felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The road ahead would not be easy, but he was ready for the challenge. He knew that the lessons learned in Magnolia Heights would be invaluable as they worked to bring about change on a larger scale. Over the next few months, Michael and Olivia found themselves busier than ever. They were constantly meeting with community leaders, policymakers, and law enforcement officials, sharing their experiences and helping to shape the Citywide program. Zoe and Ethan, inspired by their parents' work, became even more involved in their own advocacy efforts. Zoe's youth group expanded to include students from across the city, while Ethan started a program to bring kids from different neighborhoods together through sports. The Williams family's dining room table became a hub of activity, often covered with maps, reports, and plans late into the night. But despite the long hours and hard work, there was a sense of purpose and excitement that energized them all. As the Citywide Community Bridge program began to take shape, Michael and his team faced numerous challenges. There were skeptics who doubted the program's effectiveness, budget constraints to navigate, and deeply ingrained systemic issues to address. But for every setback, there were moments of triumph. The first Citywide Community Police Dialogue session was a resounding success, with residents and officers engaging in honest, sometimes difficult, but ultimately productive conversations. The program's youth mentorship initiative, inspired by Zoe and Ethan's efforts, quickly gained popularity. It paired police officers with young people from various neighborhoods, fostering understanding and breaking down barriers from an early age. As the months turned into years, Jackson began to see real, measurable changes. Crime rates dropped as community police relations improved. More diverse candidates began joining the police force, bringing with them new perspectives and ideas. The Williams family's influence extended beyond just policing and community relations. Olivia's work in education led to a citywide review of school curricula, resulting in more inclusive and diverse learning materials being adopted across Jackson's schools. Margaret Sutton, continuing her journey of growth and redemption, became a spokesperson for senior citizens' involvement in community building. She traveled to retirement communities across the city, sharing her story and encouraging others to engage with their changing neighborhoods. Officer Jake Martinez, now a sergeant, headed the police department's community engagement unit. He worked tirelessly to implement the lessons learned from Magnolia Heights across the entire force, becoming a respected figure in both law enforcement and community circles. 5 years after that fateful barbecue, Jackson had become a model city for community police relations and inclusive community building. Delegations from other cities across the country came to learn from their example, and Michael was frequently invited to speak at national conferences on police reform and community engagement. But for the Williams family, the most meaningful changes were the ones they saw in their daily lives. The tension that had once permeated their neighborhood had been replaced by a sense of warmth and community. Children of all backgrounds played together in the parks, community events were well attended, and joyous occasions, and neighbors looked out for one another with genuine care and concern. On the 5th anniversary of their move to Magnolia Heights, the Williams hosted another barbecue. But this time, it wasn't just for their neighborhood. People from all across Jackson came to celebrate the progress they had made together. As Michael stood on his back porch, looking out at the diverse crowd that filled his backyard and spilled out into the street, he felt a profound sense of gratitude and hope. The journey had not been easy, and there was still work to be done. But they had shown what was possible when a community came together with open hearts and minds. Olivia joined him on the porch, slipping her hand into his. "Can you believe how far we've come?" she asked, her voice filled with wonder. Michael squeezed her hand, his eyes scanning the happy faces in the crowd. "It's amazing," he agreed. "But you know what? I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As the sun set on another successful community gathering, casting a warm glow over the faces of friends and neighbors, the Williams couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had turned a moment of adversity into an opportunity for growth and understanding, not just for themselves, but for an entire city. The story of the Williams and Magnolia Heights served as a powerful reminder that change, while often difficult and sometimes painful, was always possible. It showed that with courage, compassion, and a willingness to listen and learn, even the deepest divides could be bridged. As the last of the guests departed, leaving behind echoes of laughter and the warmth of shared experiences, Michael and Olivia stood hand in hand on their back porch. They looked out over their yard, now quiet but still bearing the happy remnants of the day's festivities. "You know," Michael said, his voice thoughtful, "when we first moved here, I never imagined this is where we'd end up." Olivia squeezed his hand, understanding the weight of his words. "It's been quite a journey, hasn't it?" Michael nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "It has, but I wouldn't change a thing." As they turned to head inside, both Michael and Olivia felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the challenges that had shaped them, for the community that had embraced them, and for the opportunity to be a part of something truly transformative. The lights in the Williams home glowed warmly against the falling darkness, a beacon of hope and a testament to the power of understanding, forgiveness, and unity. In Jackson and beyond, the ripples of their story continued to spread, touching lives and inspiring change in ways they might never fully know. And so, as another day came to a close in Magnolia Heights, the promise of a brighter, more inclusive future shone as brightly as the stars beginning to twinkle in the Mississippi sky. The journey was far from over, but with each passing day, each small act of kindness and understanding, they moved closer to the world they envisioned, a world where everyone, regardless of their background, could feel at home. As the years passed, the impact of the Williams family and the transformation of Magnolia Heights continued to ripple outward. The success of Jackson's Community Police Relations program caught the attention of state officials, and soon Michael found himself advising on statewide police reform initiatives. Olivia's work in education had expanded beyond Jackson. She was now a sought-after speaker at educational conferences across the country, sharing her experiences and strategies for creating more inclusive learning environments. Her passion for equity in education had led to the development of a statewide curriculum review process, ensuring that the stories and contributions of all communities were represented in Mississippi schools. Zoe, now in college, had become a powerful voice for youth activism. Her high school advocacy group had grown into a statewide network of young people committed to social justice. She was studying political science with plans to pursue a career in civil rights law, inspired by the changes she had witnessed in her own community. Ethan, a high school junior, had developed his love for bringing people together through sports into a citywide inter-school sports program that emphasized teamwork, cultural exchange, and community service alongside athletic competition. The program had become so successful that other cities were looking to replicate it. Margaret Sutton, now in her mid-70s, had become something of a local celebrity. Her story of transformation from the woman who called the police on her black neighbors to a passionate advocate for community integration was frequently featured in local and national media. She spent her days visiting schools and community centers, sharing her experiences and encouraging others to confront their own biases. Officer Jake Martinez, now Captain Martinez, headed the police department's Community Relations Division. Under his leadership, Jackson's police force had become one of the most diverse and community-oriented in the country. He worked closely with Michael to continually refine and improve their approach to community policing. The annual Magnolia Heights Barbecue had grown into a citywide unity festival, drawing thousands of people from all walks of life to celebrate their shared community. It had become a symbol of Jackson's transformation and a testament to the power of grassroots change. One warm evening in late summer, 10 years after that first fateful barbecue, the Williams family sat on their back porch, enjoying the quiet after another successful festival. Michael and Olivia, a few more gray hairs between them now, sat hand in hand while Zoe and Ethan lounged in the porch swing. "You know," Zoe said, breaking the comfortable silence, "I was thinking about that day when the police showed up at our first barbecue here. It's hard to believe how much has changed since then." Ethan nodded in agreement. "Yeah, it's like that one day set off a chain reaction that just kept growing." Michael smiled at his children, pride evident in his eyes. "That's often how change happens," he said. "It starts with one moment, one decision to stand up and say, 'This isn't right.' But it's what comes after that really matters. The hard work, the difficult conversations, the willingness to listen and learn." Olivia squeezed her husband's hand, "And the courage to keep going, even when it seems impossible," she added. As they sat there, reflecting on their journey, a car pulled up in front of their house. To their surprise, Margaret Sutton emerged, waving as she made her way up the path to their porch. "I hope you don't mind me dropping by," Margaret said as she reached them. "I was just thinking about everything that's happened, and I felt compelled to come and say thank you once again." The Williams welcomed her warmly, making space for her to join them on the porch. "You know," Margaret continued, her voice thick with emotion, "I often think about how different things could have been if I hadn't made that call that day. I was so afraid of change, so set in my ways. But you all taught me that it's never too late to learn, to grow, to become better." Michael leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "Margaret, you taught us something too. You showed us that people can change, that it's possible to overcome prejudices and build real connections across differences. Your journey has inspired so many others." As they continued to talk, sharing memories and reflections on the past decade, the conversation turned to the future. Despite all the progress they had made, they knew there was still work to be done. "So, what's next?" Ethan asked, looking at his parents expectantly. Michael and Olivia exchanged a glance. "Well," Michael began, "there's been some talk at the state level about using our program as a model for other cities, and there's a national police reform conference coming up where I've been asked to speak. And I've been working on a proposal for a national education initiative," Olivia added, "something that would help schools across the country implement more inclusive curricula and teaching methods." Zoe's eyes lit up. "That's amazing. You know, some of my professors have been talking about the Magnolia Heights model in my classes. People are really taking notice of what's happening here." As the conversation continued, filled with ideas and plans for the future, the air was charged with a sense of possibility. They had already accomplished so much, but there was still so much more to do. As the evening wore on and Margaret prepared to leave, she paused at the steps of the porch. "You know," she said, turning back to the Williams family, "I never thought I'd say this, but I'm so glad you moved to Magnolia Heights. You've changed this community, this city, and you've certainly changed me. Thank you for not giving up on us." After Margaret left, the Williams family sat in reflective silence for a while. The chirping of crickets and the distant sounds of the city provided a gentle backdrop to their thoughts. Finally, Michael spoke. "You know, when I became a police officer all those years ago, I had hopes of making a difference, but I never imagined it would be like this. We've come so far, but there's still so much to do." Olivia nodded in agreement. "It's a lifetime's work," she said. "But look at what we've achieved already. And more importantly, look at what Zoe and Ethan and their generation are poised to do. They're starting from a place of understanding and inclusion that we could only dream of at their age." Zoe and Ethan exchanged a glance, feeling the weight of their parents' words. They knew they were part of something bigger than themselves, a movement that had started in their own backyard and was now spreading across the country. As the stars came out overhead, the Williams family sat together, bound by love, shared experiences, and a common purpose. They had faced adversity and emerged stronger. They had confronted prejudice and fostered understanding. They had taken a moment of potential division and turned it into a catalyst for unity. The journey that had begun with a simple barbecue had transformed not just their lives, but the lives of an entire community. And as they looked to the future, they knew that their work was far from over. But they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that together they could make a difference. The lights of Magnolia Heights twinkled in the distance, a testament to the change that had taken root there. And as the Williams family finally headed inside for the night, they carried with them the hope and determination that had brought them this far. The belief that with courage, compassion, and commitment, it was possible to build a world where everyone could feel at home.